back. This is DMXURE. This is a continuing example of how to convert from statutory accounting to US GAAP accounting. In this particular video, we're going to be focusing on how to compute statutory reserves. Please keep in mind that this is a very high level statutory reserve calculation. It is not complete. If you want to see the complete methodology for computing a statutory reserve, sometime when I have like 2 years to show you, I will, but not today. Now, when we do the statutory reserve calculation, we're going to need some interest rate numbers here, and I'm just pulling some numbers from the other page and putting them on the sheet to keep the calculations reasonable. We have a full year interest rate and a half year interest rate. The half year interest rate is used for items that happen in the middle of the year. Examples include benefits and expenses. I do have a set of discount rates that I'm computing here. These are just adjustments for interest that is expected to be earned. The adjustments for interest, by the way, are using conservative statutory reserve assumptions. Middle of the year, you have a little bit more discounting going on. More discounting means a smaller number here. We have that for each and every period. When we do the reserve calculation, it is a projection, and I'm trying to do this for a single policy. So you have a single policy here. I'm going to subtract off expected deaths, and the expected deaths are going to be based off of the statutory reserve assumptions and expected lapses. Get a number of policies, bring this up, and we can carry this forward each and every period as we go through. Well, from that, I can compute the projected death benefits each and every period. And I can compute the expected expenses. It should be no surprise. You start off with $35. The next year it's going to be a little bit lower because you have a number of surrenders and there's going to be a few people who die. It keeps on going down to the end of the projection. We're going to compute a reserve at time 0. This is really a reserve at the beginning of the first period. I'm putting it at time 0 just to make the calculations look a little easier. It's just going to be the present value of this benefit stream using these discount rates right up here. So if I go ahead and do my trace thing here, you can see this set of benefits and this set of discount rates. There's a small adjustment of 1 and 1 here. And if we look back at the formula that you're dividing by 2 ones, there's no reason to have this, at least for the very first period. But I want to come up with projected per policy reserves at future periods. And so when I get to the second period, I need to make an adjustment because there's going to be less people around. And one of those adjustments is going to be there's only going to be starting off not with 0.91 people and a discount rate of 0.9361. We have to gross up the reserve for a single policy at this point in time. So this is at the end of year 1. So we'll remove the arrows. We do a similar calculation like that for expenses. We determine the net premium rate. Now, the net premium rate is just going to be the amount of premium needed to get an initial reserve of 0 using statutory assumptions. And so present value benefits plus the present value of expenses minus the present value of net premiums, that all adds up to 0. That 393 there, you can project those net premiums. This is for a single policy. I can determine the present value at each point of time, and therefore I can determine reserve at each point in time for a single policy. Then to get to the reserve for all of the policies, we're just going to multiply by the number of policies in force at the end of year 1. In this case, we're going to come up with a reserve of 290,000. And you can carry that forward all the way through the very end. So this is one way to do a reserve calculation using a present value approach. I'm going to scroll down here. You can also come up with a reserve that is based off of a reserve roll forward approach. Beginning reserves start off with 0. We're going to add in net premiums. We're going to put in some investment income. Now that investment income is going to be based off of the timing of premiums and benefits, and it's going to be using the conservative statutory reserve assumptions. We're going to have expected death and expected expenses. And then we have to make a couple more adjustments here. And those couple of adjustments are for the idea here. If we're using all these numbers up above, this was with conservative assumptions. But we're not going to have the right number of policies at the very end because the actual number of deaths and the actual number of surrenders will happen. So that's what these two numbers are for. But we do all the calculations and you come up with the exact same reserve number as what we have up here, which just tells us our calculations are much more likely to be correct. This reserve roll forward methodology is very, very good for a source of earnings analysis, and we'll talk about that a little later on. It's a good way to do your calculations because basically we have two different models, one a present value approach, one a roll forward approach to produce the same number, and we're much less likely to make mistakes when we use one of these approaches. So thank you for watching. Our next video will be related to how to convert to US GAAP.